ask you a question because you're all about justice, social justice and racist stuff. I feel a certain kind of way when people ask me this question. I feel offended when they ask me this question or when they say this. I want to get your thoughts on it. When white people come up to you and say, I don't see color and I love you. I get offended by that statement, and I had to educate some of my peers on that. Like, hey, but it's ain't about me. I want to know you. What are your thoughts when a white person comes up to you and says, Danny, I don't see you as a black woman. I don't see color. How do you feel?
Yes. So when I was at that old job and I sat and had this conversation with my boss at the time, and we talked about what I told you we talked about. One of the first things he said was, I don't see color. And in that moment, I was very offended because I'm presenting to you an issue that you wouldn't find to be an issue if you don't see my color.
Wow.
So I felt in that moment that not only were you taking an easy way out, but you were not seeing me in my fullness, which means you couldn't see the issues that I was discussing. So that topic actually inspired one of my first graphics to be widely shared. I understand where you're coming from, but impact is always greater than intent. And that mentality is very dangerous because to me, I'm thinking, well, are you actively dismantling your own prejudices and bias if you don't see color? Like, I don't feel like that's going to be top of mind priority for you.
Wow.
Or are you ignoring the complexities of racial issues? If you don't see it, I don't see how you're actively thinking about that. And I don't want the struggles of people of color in society, especially Black people, to be minimized because you decided that it's just not going to be something that you consider when you look at me, even though when it comes to implicit bias, regardless of whether or not you actively are allowing it to, it dictates so many of the things that you do, both directly and indirectly when you're in relationship with me. So I wholeheartedly reject that statement, although I know where it comes from. I just want people to realize, like, hey, this is actually the power and the weight that this phrase has when I use it. Yeah. And so I'm just not going to use it anymore.
Right. I feel you. I love it.
That's how I feel about that.
I'm right there with you. Like, trust me on that part. I've had several conversations, and I know some of them come from a good place, but I'm just like, hey, well, listen, I understand your heart. But let me let you know how my heart is and how I'm feeling. Right. And so I'm rocking with you on that one. When you hear the word privilege, what have you learned? What are your thoughts on it? And how are you expressing what you've learned and your thoughts on that through your art and through your business?
Yeah. Whew. I like this. I have never explicitly made an illustration about white privilege in and of itself because I feel as though it seeps into every aspect of the way we live our lives. And I don't think that that's a specific topic that I can get super specific with in one graphic. But when I was first having a conversation with my audience about the topic of privilege, I said, look, I did a 3-part series about how to handle this race conversation if you're new to it. And I started out when one of my first sessions was talking about the inner work. And so I said, before you can even engage in this conversation as a white person, you need to understand the idea of privilege. And then I opened it up to everyone and said, so privilege in and of itself is defined, Ijeoma Oluo, an author, defines it as advantages that you have that others do not, period. Some people go and add the unearned advantages you have that others do not. And I think it means the same thing. But when it comes to the conversation of race, we are discussing white privilege in the sense that as a white person, you have unearned advantages that I do not in American society simply because of the color of your skin. That does not mean that you have not worked hard or that you haven't had any struggles, but it does mean that the color of your skin isn't a deterrent when it comes to many different things you do in your day-to-day life. So that's how I approach it. I want to open it up and be broad and say we all experience different forms of privilege. At this moment in my life, I might be regarded as someone who holds socioeconomic privilege, And then as a Christian in many spaces, Christian privilege exists. I just think that it's broad, but it also needs to be acknowledged in the sphere of race. Absolutely. As a white person to say, like, I do have white privilege and it's nothing wrong with me.
Right.
It's just a fact.
It's fact. I was one of my guys that I follow on YouTube is a pastor, And he said, I don't have a problem with privilege.
Mm-hmm.
I have a problem with how you steward your privilege. You know, he was like, so, you know, when I hear the term, he says, when I hear the term white privilege, okay, yeah, in certain instances that is wrong, but you can't control how people give you that. But what you do with your privilege, that's where I have a problem. If you use that to get over another particular person, if you use that opportunity and that privilege to disrespect or to bring down another person, you're not being a good steward of it. Because he said the truth of the fact is my son is going to have certain privileges just for being my son, you know, and so he shouldn't be upset that he has that privilege, but he does need to be a good steward of that privilege.
Absolutely.
And so there's nothing wrong with white people. Well, some of them. I mean, because some of them are just racist. Let's just be real. Thank God I'm not around racist white people, but there are some racist white people that just need to get checked. And so we won't do that on this show. I'm talking to you. You know, we having a good time right now.
Right.
But for the most part, you know, I think that there are some amazing, amazing white people out there who just want to learn. And people like yourself, they're learning from you.